Locked in hell, the most terrifying things prisoners have experienced in US and UK prisons. Like, subscribe, and comment if you're ready to step into the dark, because once these doors close, not everyone comes back the same. The call came in just before dawn. A corrections officer at HMP Blackwater in the UK stood frozen outside cell 317, keys shaking in his hand. Inside, an inmate sat upright on the concrete bunk, eyes open, body still. No blood. No visible injuries. Just a look of terror locked into his face, as if he'd seen something moments before he died. Across the Atlantic, less than 12 hours later, a similar scene unfolded inside a maximum security prison in the American Midwest. 2 prisons.
2 men. Same week.
Same silence. Officials moved fast to control the narrative. Natural causes, they said. No foul play. But when internal investigators compared notes, the timelines didn't make sense. Both inmates had filed complaints days earlier, reports of threats, sleepless nights, and something they described as psychological pressure that never stops. The files were stamped, ignored, and buried. The first inmate was Daniel Reeves, 34, serving a 5-year sentence for fraud. Nonviolent. Quiet. According to cell block records, Daniel had refused protection. He told a prison counselor, "It's not the gangs. It's the system. It's what happens when the lights go out." In the U.S., the second man was Marcus Hill, 41, held in administrative segregation. 23 hours a day alone. 1 hour in a concrete yard with walls so high you couldn't see the sky. Marcus wrote letters to his sister saying he could hear screaming through the vents at night, sometimes begging, sometimes laughing. Investigators began pulling surveillance footage. Cameras covered every hallway, every door. Or so they thought. In both prisons, there were blind spots, small gaps where cameras malfunctioned or were never installed. In those gaps, inmates vanished for minutes at a time, sometimes longer. No official movement logs. No explanations. Former prisoners were quietly interviewed. One man from a U.S. facility leaned forward and whispered, You don't have to be touched to be broken in there." A UK inmate said the fear wasn't dying, it was surviving long enough to lose your mind. Overcrowded cells. Constant noise. Guards stretched thin. Inmates policing inmates. Then came the discovery that shattered the official story. In Daniel Reeves' sealed complaint file, investigators found a final handwritten note never logged into the system. 4 words, underlined twice. "They lock you in hell." And when investigators traced who'd signed off on ignoring that warning, they realized the danger wasn't just inside the cells, it was embedded deep within the walls themselves. The investigation widened, and almost immediately, the pressure hit back. Within 48 hours of reopening the cases, a key witness in the U.S. facility was transferred without notice. His name was Luis Moreno, a former cellmate of Marcus Hill. Official paperwork claimed routine relocation. But when investigators tried to track him down, his inmate number led nowhere. No intake record. No release date. Just a digital dead end. Inside prison systems, that kind of disappearance doesn't happen by accident. In the UK, the same pattern emerged. A corrections officer who had worked the night shift near Daniel Reeves' cell suddenly went on indefinite medical leave. His colleagues said he'd been pale for days, barely speaking. One guard recalled him muttering, "You can hear it even when you don't want to." When investigators requested his incident reports, entire pages were missing, ripped clean from the logbook. As pressure mounted, survivors began to talk, but only off the record. One former UK inmate described a punishment known unofficially as the quiet room. No cameras. No clocks. No explanation for how long you'd stay. "They don't beat you," he said. "They erase you. After a while, your thoughts stop making sense." In the U.S., men from administrative segregation described guards manipulating light cycles, noise levels, and isolation to break resistance. No bruises. No marks. Just psychological collapse. Internal emails surfaced next. In both countries, administrators discussed behavioral compliance strategies and cost-effective control measures. The language was clinical, sanitized. But between the lines, investigators saw a pattern. Overcrowding had pushed systems beyond capacity, and instead of reform, fear had become a management tool. Then came the second death. At the U.S. prison, an inmate named Thomas Klein was found collapsed in a shower area during lockdown. Like the others, there were no visible injuries. But unlike the others, Thomas had been scheduled to testify in an internal review just 3 days later. His testimony notes, recovered from a trash bin, described guards instructing inmates to intimidate one another, turning prisoners into enforcers to maintain order without paperwork. The UK investigators received their own warning. A plain envelope arrived with no return address. Inside was a memory stick. The footage was grainy, time-stamped months earlier, showing Daniel Reeves being escorted down a corridor not listed on any prison map. As the door closed behind him, the camera feed cut to black. Someone didn't want the truth uncovered. And now it was clear, this wasn't about a few bad actors. It was about a system that had learned how to make terror invisible. By the time federal and parliamentary oversight committees were alerted, the prisons were already locking down, not for safety, but for silence. Investigators on both sides of the Atlantic began connecting the dots. The hidden corridors, the missing logs, the inmates who complained, then died. What emerged was a shadow system operating beneath official policy, designed to manage overcrowding without public scrutiny. Isolation wasn't punishment, it was leverage. Fear wasn't a side effect, it was strategy. A former U.S. prison psychologist broke ranks. In a sworn statement, she described being pressured to clear inmates for extended solitary confinement despite obvious signs of mental collapse. They didn't want evaluations, she said. They wanted justification. When she refused, her contract wasn't renewed. Her notes vanished from the system within a week. In the UK, a similar whistleblower surfaced, a retired prison administrator who admitted that non-documented holding areas had existed for years. They were meant for emergencies, he claimed. But emergencies became routine. According to him, Daniel Reeves had been flagged as a destabilizing influence, not because he was violent, but because he talked. He asked questions. He filed complaints. He reminded others they were still human. As investigators prepared warrants for internal searches, something chilling happened. Surveillance footage from both prisons began auto-deleting in large batches, flagged as corrupted. IT staff denied involvement. External backups were missing. Someone had anticipated this moment. Then came the near-fatal warning. In the U.S., an internal affairs officer driving home late one night noticed headlights tailing him for miles. When he pulled into his driveway, the car vanished. The next morning, he found an envelope taped to his door. Inside was a photocopy of Marcus Hill's final letter, one never sent. At the bottom, a handwritten note read, "Stop digging or you'll join them." Meanwhile, UK investigators finally gained access to the corridor from the memory stick footage. Behind a maintenance wall, they discovered a narrow passage leading to 3 reinforced doors. Inside the last room were restraints bolted to the floor, soundproof padding on the walls, and a handwritten schedule scratched into the paint. Names.
Dates.
Durations. Daniel Reeves' name was there. But the most disturbing detail wasn't who was listed, it was who wasn't. Several names were crossed out with no explanation. No records. No bodies. As the truth closed in, one question haunted every investigator involved. If these men weren't meant to survive, how many already hadn't? The final confrontation didn't happen in a courtroom. It happened behind closed doors, in reports the public was never meant to read. Faced with mounting evidence, oversight bodies in both the US and UK issued emergency audits. Official statements promised transparency, reforms, accountability. But insiders knew the truth would be negotiated, not revealed. Administrators resigned quietly. Contracts were terminated by mutual agreement. No one used the word prison. They used phrases like procedural failure and oversight gap. The rooms were dismantled first. When investigators returned to the hidden corridor in the UK weeks later, the reinforced doors were gone. Fresh paint covered the walls. Maintenance logs claimed the area had never been operational. In the US, the segregation unit was reclassified, its records sealed under national security exemptions. The message was clear. The system would survive, even if the truth didn't. Families received letters of condolence, carefully worded, bloodless. Daniel Reeves' mother was told her son had suffered acute stress-related complications. Marcus Hill's sister was informed his death was unavoidable given institutional conditions. Neither explanation answered the question that haunted them. What did their sons see in their final days? One investigator, nearing retirement, kept a private copy of the evidence. In a final interview, he said something that never made the official report. They didn't kill these men with their hands. They built a place where hope couldn't live. According to him, the real weapon wasn't isolation or fear, it was deniability. Years later, former inmates still wake up gasping for air. They describe the same things, independently. The noise that never stops. The lights that never go fully dark. The sense that you are being watched even when you're alone. Psychologists call it institutional trauma. Survivors call it hell with paperwork. No officer was ever convicted. No administrator ever stood trial. The prisons continue to operate, now under revised guidelines. On paper, conditions have improved, but buried deep in sealed archives are the names of men who complained too much, asked too many questions, or simply couldn't endure being erased. And that's the final truth investigators couldn't change. Prison doesn't always end when the sentence does. For some, it follows them forever, in silence, in memory, in the spaces no camera ever covered. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what comes next, because some doors were never meant to be opened.